Hi, welcome back. We're going to go over some of the major secular ethical theories, and then after this, we'll go over an alternative in the natural moral law. All right, so secular ethical theories attempt to find the basis of morality in some aspect of human nature. We talk about humans as intellect, emotion, and will. Each of the secular theories is going to try to ground ethics in some aspect of human nature. Remember, we said the good is based on human nature. Well, people disagree on what human nature is. So these secular ethical theories are secular insofar as they are not appealing to any kind of God for morality or anything outside of the world and humans in the world. So these are non-theistic, maybe even atheistic ethical theories, and they develop mostly in the modern period. Not all of them, but the modern period in philosophy, if you recall, attempts to do ethics apart from God and maybe apart from metaphysics, but we still need a view of human nature. Now, I'm hesitating. You see me hesitating because I think there may be a few in here that could be consistent with God or religion, but in their secular version is what we're looking at here. And the first is ethical egoism. You've maybe heard of this. Egoism seeks the moral absolute in the individual person's desire. So notice it's individual focused and it's focused on desires. One ought to seek one's own interest or pleasure without regard for anyone else. It is hedonic, happiness or pleasure is the good. It was examined by Plato in the character Thrasymachus in the Republic. He represents ethical egoism. And it was taught by Hobbes in 1616 and by Ayn Rand in 1950. And you could look this up. I would suggest if you wanted to do research on any of these theories, you use the Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy. Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy, and you can look each of these up and read more about them. You could also read about these different philosophers who held to these theories. Okay, so egoism is individual focused. Maybe you can even think about characters in movies or shows you've seen who represent the egoist. Utilitarianism seeks the moral absolute in collective desire. So not just the individual, the group. And this is very popular today. One ought to do that which would produce the greatest amount of happiness for the greatest number of people. It was taught by John Stuart Mill, 1870, and it is implicit in Marxism, which is popular right now. So sometimes in the United States, you see a battle between egoism and that, rugged individual who's pursuing money and, success, and the utilitarian groups who are trying to be compassionate and bring, comfort to the largest number of people in the group that we can. Okay, so those are both centered on desire, though. The good is based on pleasure, satisfaction of desire. That's very popular today, right? Deontology is also around, and it conflicts with those two theories. Deontology seeks the good in the will, not the intellect, not the emotions, desires, will. Seeks the good in a will that is governed by reason apart from desire. So it's going to say, take your desire for pleasure and put it over here. You have this will, which is going to direct your actions, and it has to be guided by reason. Moral duty should be done for duty's sake. Do it because it's the right thing. One should act only on those rules of action which one can will to become universal laws. This has been taught by Immanuel Kant. So if you want to make morality universal, then you have to be willing to live by the rules that you make. So let's say cheating on your spouse, you want to say that that's wrong, then you have to be willing to say, I also will not cheat on my spouse. It's kind of like a secular version of do unto others what you would have them do unto you. All right, deontology. But more broadly, it makes the good doing the right thing or your duty. Existentialism is also very popular right now. Young people love it. I think every young person has to have an existential phase of their life. Existentialism finds the good by an act of the will, which determines the good independent of there being any essential qualities in things. So in this post-Nietzschean era, where we say things don't have a nature, then guess what? Humans don't have a nature either. So you make your nature through the choices that you make. You create yourself through your choices. Man is the sole determiner of meaning, and by taking full responsibility for one's choices, man achieves authentic existence. This was taught by Sartre in the 1950s. It's very popular right now. It's basically, there is no moral absolute. There may be societal sanctions on your choices, but it's not like what you do is right or wrong. You create yourself through your choices, and you should be authentic with yourself. That sounds popular, right? Naturalism. Now, this is a contemporary view, but also an ancient view. Naturalism seeks the good in individual instinct. It's more our animal side than our rational side. Human beings, unfettered by artificial conventions, are naturally good and should live according to the instinctive promptings of their nature. The uncivilized man is naturally noble. Civilization corrupts man. This was taught by Rousseau, by Lao Tzu, and Taoism. So you can see it's an ancient religion, and it's also ancient religion, ancient ethics, and also contemporary. Think of it this way. Civilization is what binds humans. Technology is what enslaves us. So we're more real when we unshackle ourselves from civilization and technology. This sometimes was applied to Native Americans when the people came to the New World to colonize, and they thought they were the noble people, noble savages, they called them. That's really not politically correct to say that now, but that's one application of this philosophy, this ethics, was to see human beings in their natural world without all the technology. Those are good people. We become evil when we take on all this civilizational baggage. Okay, a secular theory, right? Tradition. Now this is probably maybe in all cultures. Tradition seeks the good in the wisdom of the collective instinct expressed in a way of life that has been handed down from ages past to the present generation. So naturalism was individual instinct. Tradition is collective instinct. There is no higher standard than the tradition itself. There's an element of tradition in all cultures in teaching the young, but it is especially present in the teachings of Confucius in China and in the reverence shown towards the ancestors. We tend not to value tradition much anymore here in the West, but this is how we pass down values. So we could make a whole ethical theory out of this. Tradition is morality. The morality we have is the morality of our ancestors, and that's why we have it. Have you ever asked your parents, Mom, Dad, why are we, whatever ethical view you have, why are we that? They'll probably say, because that's what we learned from our parents. Okay, the next one is humanism. And this is where we seek the good and the actualization of all of one's potential, not just your mind, not just your desires or your will, not your instincts, but your whole being. No particular aspect is especially chosen over another. One ought to realize the fullness of one's humanity. How we know what our nature is like, apart from knowing what is real, becomes a critical issue. This has been taught by Aristotle and by Maslow. You know, Maslow's hierarchy of needs, where you have the lower needs. You can't get to the upper needs until you have the lower needs met. And the question is, what is human nature, though, in naturalism? in humanistic naturalism. What is a human? Are we evolved animals? Are we thinking beings? Do we have a soul or not? So it becomes difficult to figure out how you can actualize your potential when we aren't really sure what a human is. So we need to know what is real. We need to do metaphysics in order to know what is good for what is a human being and what is good for human beings. Stoicism, I think Stoicism is making a comeback. I see some of my students reading the Stoics, and I think it's because Stoicism provides a nice way of life. It's an attractive ethical system. It's ancient. It's noble, but it's also divorced of metaphysics. It comes out of a skeptical worldview. We can't really know what's real, but we need to get on this life, and this life is like a lot of suffering. So we need to know how to approach life with a calm that doesn't disturb us so that we can get on with life. So it's a ethical system that's pretty strict, that doesn't involve you having to submit to God or have belief in God. It seeks the good in the denial of desires. Why? Because the desires aren't always satisfied, and life is very full of suffering. Like all philosophies of asceticism, denial of your desires, desires are seen as a hindrance to the good. Eastern asceticism radically denies desires by denying the reality of the self, which has these desires. Remember Shankara and spiritual monism. This has been taught by Epictetus in Greek philosophy and Shankara in Indian philosophy. So Stoicism has appealed to many people, and it's a way of pushing on through harsh conditions and suffering in life. Contemplation. Okay, this one may appeal to some people who are more into thinking, the intellect, but then it veers off. So let's look at this one. It seeks the good in the exercise of the intellect. So contemplation, thinking. In Plato, that should be capitalized, the object of knowledge is attained apart from the use of the senses. So Plato thinks you can get to the good directly through thinking about it without your senses, without your body. And he also thinks in the afterlife, your mind is in contact with the good directly, apart from your body. This knowledge is difficult to attain for Plato, and it is reached only by a few in this life, if anybody at all. And those few have to be practicing philosophy. It's a hard way to get the good. The good is not clear, and it's not easily knowable for this view. Plato was a major philosopher influencing Western philosophy. He lived in Athens. Here is his dates, and he taught this. And it is a kind of mystical contemplation. It's a little unclear what the cognitive content of this contemplation is. It's a non-cognitive contemplation, so I'm not sure what it is. It's an experience, and no experience is meaningful without interpretation. So we've gone through these secular ethical theories. You should ask yourself, hang on, let's see. I got rid of that other handout. Do they provide a metaphysical absolute? What is human nature that each of these is basing their theories off of some aspect of human nature? And do they have rational justification? How would we pick one of these when they conflict with one another? Do we go with our feelings? Do we just say, I like this one? Some people just go, I like existentialism, I'm going to go with that. But that's your feelings. That's not rational justification. I like Stoicism. It works for me. That's a practical justification, not rational justification. So I will ask you if you have any rational justification for picking one of these over another, please let me know, and I will look into it. But right now, I'm not sure any of them has rational justification. So what is the alternative? The alternative is non-secular ethical theories, and I'm going to show you one that is called the natural moral law, and it is based on human nature as fundamentally rational And it does assume God exists. So we'll have to see what happens when you add God to the mixture and do ethical theory with God in the picture. All right, so I'm going to pause here and come back with the handout on the natural moral law.